What's going on, you guys? It's Cody Steck. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about how to get started using Robinhood margin. This might be something that you're interested in right now, but there's a few things we need to talk about before you jump into this. So with that being said, we're going to talk about why you'd want to use it, how to get it activated, and how to be careful with it so you don't end up in a bad spot. Now, you may be looking at the possibility of using margin because you want to be able to maximize your gains. After all, this is going to be the way that you can grow your account portfolio the quickest, but it also does come with some more risk. Right now, the market is very frothy and there's a lot of people taking a hell of a lot of risk right now. And so the market is going up very quickly. And, a lot of people who've been in the stock market for a long time are kind of saying, hey, when's this going to turn around? When is this going to stop? What are we looking at here? So this is something you need to be careful with. Using Robinhood margin, you can get into a bad spot because you do have a couple of requirements that you need to know about. You have to know about initial requirements and you have to know about maintenance requirements as well. I want to touch on those two things right now really quickly because these are the things that you need to do before getting started with Robinhood margin. Look, I want to give you kind of the pros and cons to using this before telling you how to actually get it activated and get started with. I know that's why you're here looking at the video, so you've probably already decided, hey, I want to do this, but I have to throw out this word of caution first. So the initial requirement is the initial account balance that you have to have before you'll be able to purchase stocks with margin. And then you've got your maintenance requirement, which basically says that the value of your account has to stay above that level, or else the brokerage that you're working with, in this case Robinhood, could actually give you a margin call upon which you have to then deposit additional funds in order to get your account balance up, or you have to be able to sell off stocks to reduce the margin that you have borrowed. Basically, why they do this is because if your stocks are dropping in price, then the value of your account is going to be dropping as well. And if Robinhood has loaned you money, they need to cover their losses. They need to make sure that they're not going to end up in a bad spot. So this is why they would initiate a margin call on your account. And you have to remedy that within 3 days in order to avoid, having Robinhood basically just say, hey, we're going to sell your shares because we need to liquidate to make sure we don't lose additional money if the market crashes. So that's something you really have to be aware of. You have to be careful with margin calls because this is where a lot of people get into trouble. If the market's going up, everything can be great with margin. You can make a lot of money, but as soon as the market pulls back or perhaps has a crash, this is where you can get into a lot of trouble because if you're not able to get into that margin call, you're either forced to liquidate at a loss or you have to put in money, which you may not have. So this is really why so many people say, hey, be very careful using margin. I think that, in my opinion, I think that margin is actually a very powerful tool. You just have to be careful with using it. For instance, for myself, I do use margin because I can borrow money at a very cheap rate. And so I think that it's worth it. I think it's worth taking on that risk to be able to get some bigger gains in some stocks that I have very high conviction in. And worst case, I do have some other shares or options that I could sell off that I would, not necessarily, that I've got gains in that I'd be okay selling if I needed to. But again, I also have other money sitting on the sidelines that I could put into the account if I were to run into a margin call. So this is something where for myself, I do use a little bit of margin. Not always. I've got some cash sitting on the side, but I do have margin in a couple of my accounts right now. And I think it's one of those things where if you use it safely, and you use it wisely, you can come out ahead and actually be in a really good spot. So I don't want to ramble on any further about the pros and the cons, the risks and rewards of margin. I want to actually show you how to get started using margin. So let's jump into my phone. We're going to take a look at this together and we're going to talk about how to activate margin and what you need to know about it on the Robinhood app. Okay, so looking at the Robinhood app here, the one thing you do have to know about Robinhood is that you have to have Robinhood Gold, which is their subscription service that it costs $5 per month in order to be able to enroll in margin investing. This is kind of their subscription service where they give you access to some additional research and tools and then also give you access to margin. The cool thing about this is that the first $1,000 of margin on Robinhood is actually free, so you're not going to pay interest on that. Once you have your Robinhood account pulled up, you're going to come into the settings over here. We're going to go into settings again, and this is where you can actually see your settings for your account. We're going to click on Robinhood Gold, and this is where you can actually turn on or turn off margin investing. So for my particular account here, you can see that the monthly fee is $5. That's for Robinhood Gold, and you can see that my unpaid interest on the account here is is 16 cents. Really not too bad. I mean, basically peanuts for how long I held the margin in this particular account. I don't think I have any margin right now in this account, but let's actually go back and check. If we come over here to buying power, okay, so I do have $42 of margin being used right now just because I did sell off some options just recently. So this is why I've got buying power here. Like I said, margin power or margin used is at $42. So jumping back over here to Robinhood Gold, 16 cents is the margin that I need to pay. If we actually click on this where it says margin investing, if you don't have it turned on, this is where it should show you the, it'll ask you, hey, do you want to enroll in margin? And it's going to walk you through, what you need to know about it. It's going to talk about a lot of the things I just talked about, but this is where you can actually, go in and turn it on or turn it off. So this gives me an overview of the total margin that I can use for my Robinhood account, $4,318. The margin that I'm currently using is just $42, and the interest rate is 2.5%. The margin rate at 2.5% is pretty phenomenal, guys. This is why Robinhood, if you're going to use margin, I would say you have to use Robinhood. I don't use any margin on any other accounts except for my Fidelity account because there are some over-the-counter stocks that I really wanted to purchase, and so I had to go in a little bit heavier on those. I only have like 5% margin on that one account, so I'm not too worried about it, but I'm paying a much higher rate over on Fidelity. I think it's at the 7.5%. So actually, I think it's about 7%. Anyway, interest rate here on Robinhood, 2.5%. I mean, this gives you that range, that difference of being able to use margin and get gains of, let's say you get 10%, right? Okay, well then you just made 7.5% on the difference here, right? Because you're paying 2.5% in interest and you made 10%. Well, if you're paying 7% like I would be at Fidelity, now you've only made 3%. When I look at this, I'm kind of thinking, it's really hard to kind of justify taking on the additional risk of using margin in the first place just to get a 3% gain. That's really not worth it. I need to be getting, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% gains in order to justify the risk of having margin and using this debt. So this is where you can actually turn this on. If we click on learn more about margin investing, this is where it's going to talk through everything you need to know about margin, right? So what is margin investing? What are the risks of this? It gives you a couple of examples. It says, hey, what if I'm not suitable for this? How do I pay for it? And this is actually one thing that I want to point out because this is really important. Like I said, the first $1,000 of margin is included with the $5 fee that you pay. If you decide to pay more, you're going to pay 2.5% yearly interest. Your interest is calculated daily on your end of day margin used, and this is divided by 360 days. So then it gives you an example here. The important thing to know here is that this is going to basically be accredited or be charged against your account. So it actually says, if we scroll down here, we'll accumulate interest every day and charge your account every 30 days at the end of your gold billing cycle. You can always check the current status of your billing cycle and view unpaid interest in the gold billing section of the account overview. And that's exactly where we just were a second ago, where we were looking at the unpaid interest that I had here on my account. So they're basically just going to charge it to your account. So if you had, $2,000 in cash buying power just sitting in your account waiting to be used, well, they're just going to charge your interest that you have for margin against that. So let's say you owe $10 in margin interest. Now you're going to only have $1,990 to go out and purchase stocks, basically. So it kind of acts like a line of credit you can borrow from and pay back. So it's not like something you can just like take out, or it's not just like credited to your account if you're not using it. You have to use it. You have to, actually put it into stocks in order for the margin to start accumulating. And then when you have that, they're charging it on a daily basis, and they're going to charge it against your account. So if you're still in margin at the end of your billing cycle, well, then you're going to go further into margin, basically further into debt because of the margin interest. So that's going to take more to pay it off. So you either have to put additional money in to pay that off, or you have to sell off stocks, or you have to take gains in one way or another to basically pay back that debt that you have there. So it says, how do I know when I'm using margin? This is actually really helpful. How do I stop using margin? There's a ton of information on here, and it says, this is everything you need to know about using margin. So there's really no excuse to come into this and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to use this. I didn't know, or whatever. This is going to give you everything you need to know. It talks about how you can increase your available margin. The amount of margin you can use goes up when you add more money to your account. You can set a borrowing limit. So you can say, hey, I only want to borrow up to 20% or up to 30%, or I think it comes in the form of an actual dollar limit. This is something I would highly recommend doing because you don't want to get too heavy on margin. You get too heavy on margin, that's where you can really run into problems. I'd say, for most people, using 5, 10, maybe 15 or 20%, if you got a high income, you got money sitting on the sidelines, or you're okay to sell off some stocks quickly if you get a margin call, I'd say that's okay. But for most people, I'm thinking, maybe 5 or 10% at most is probably what most people should use, especially if you're new to this whole thing. It also talks about why you can't use all available margin when I buy a stock. Some stocks are seen as higher risk compared to others, and so they won't let you actually use as much margin to buy those stocks. You know, for instance, if you're getting into the GameStop, that's going to be extremely volatile. I know that whole thing is kind of past, but like if you were trying to get into that with margin, Robinhood would say, before the whole debacle, right? They'd basically come back and say, look, this is a high risk stock, so we're not going to let you use as much margin to actually purchase it. But on the flip side, if you're going to try to buy Apple, you know, they're going to let you use as much margin as you want. Basically, that's going to be the lowest risk because it's not going to drop, you know, 30% in a day. It's not going to go up 30% in a day. It's probably not even going to go up more than like, you know, maybe 5%. It might only drop 5%. And so this is why you've got these different levels of risk assessment with the margin. And that's why how Robinhood kind of protects themselves by not letting you go all in on a very volatile stock. It also talks about margin maintenance and margin calls, which we talked about, and what to do if you get a margin call. So basically, that's an overview of everything you need to know about Robinhood margin. I hope this was helpful for you, and I hope I answered all of your questions. I've made a few other videos about that here on my channel. Make sure to check out the links down in the description below. You can get some free stocks with Robinhood. You can get some free stocks with Webull. You can also get some additional information about those other videos that I've made on the channel using the links in the description below. There will also be a link to my real estate Discord down below. Make sure to join that Discord group if you want to learn more about real estate. We're talking everything from sales to investing to just all things real estate. So I really kind of want to grow that community. So if you're interested in that, make sure to join over there. And with all of that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.